And finally, Madam President, as we approach the end of the Senate session, I have the unhappy task of bidding farewell to senators who will be concluding their time in this chamber. Within an hour, our dear friend, and dear colleague, Senator Tom Udall of New Mexico, will give his final speech here on the Senate floor. For the past 12 years, senators have been lucky to work with a legislator of Senator Udall's caliber, someone who possesses a mastery of public policy, who is practical as well as principled. You always know where Senator Udall stands on an issue, but you also know he's always willing to sit with you and work with you until you find common ground. And because of these qualities, Tom will leave this chamber as a supremely accomplished legislator, a fierce defender of the environment, and a true champion of the American West. Now, a lot of politicians get described as wunderkinds for getting elected at a young age, but you'd be hard-pressed to find someone who got their start in politics earlier than Tom. He made his debut at the plucky age of 5, hoisting campaign signs from the back of his family's convertible during his dad's first bid for Congress. Public service runs deep in the veins of a Udall. It might be called the sap of the Udall family tree. Alongside his father, Tom looked up to his Uncle Mo, who succeeded his father in Congress and ran for president as one of his generation's great environmental advocates. Not too long ago, the Senate roll call featured 2 Udalls, Tom and cousin Mark. Even now, our colleague from Utah, Senator Lee, is a second cousin of the Udall clan. But ultimately, it was Tom's dad who taught him a lifelong love of the political process. During the years Stuart Udall served as Interior Secretary, Tom would watch from the living room as his dad sat at the dinner table, surrounded by Democrats and Republicans alike, both sides at dinner working together. Those memories left a mark. And Tom would spend his time in Congress trying to do much the same. Tom's work with Senator Vitter led to one of his greatest accomplishments in office, the first major revision of the Toxic Substances Control Act in 40 years. At the time, it was the most significant environmental law to pass Congress in over 20 years. Tom also had become one of the Senate's leading authorities on tribal policy, co-sponsoring over a quarter of the bills that passed through the Indian Affairs Committee on their way to being signed into law. Legislation to improve tribal access to affordable health care, and funding to support Native American language preservation programs and boost support for Native American entrepreneurs all bear the Udall stamp. And when it comes to protecting our environment and public lands, no one commands greater respect than the senior senator from New Mexico. Tom helped increase funding for the Department of Interior by 25%, including billions to protect our national parks and expand our wildlife preserves. Through the Great American Outdoors Act, Tom helped secure permanent funding for the Land and Water Conservation Fund, a fund his dad helped establish over 40 years ago. One of Tom's favorite authors, Wallace Stegner, once wrote, "Something will have gone out of us as a people if we ever let the remaining wilderness be destroyed. We simply need that wild country available to us, even if we never do more than drive to its edge and look in." Well, Tom did a whole lot more than look in. He preserved, he conserved, he expanded the great American wilderness for generations hence. These highlights, impressive as they are only the tip of the iceberg. Over his 12 years in office, Tom's legislative accomplishments ran the gamut of consumer protection, conservation policy, climate change, the protection of tribal nations, and most recently, a principled stand against the current administration's attempts to roll back critical environmental protections. And through it all, Tom has been unendingly civil, decent, kind. He has deep friendships, real friendships, long-lasting friendships in our caucus and across the aisle. He prefers to solve problems, no matter who gets the credit, sometimes resisting the urge to make a splash in public. Kidding aside, Tom is as down-to-earth as they come. There's just no artifice about him. He's a decent senator, and as a man, You couldn't find any better. Other senators will attest to these qualities, I'm sure. So will his staff, a tribute that's perhaps even greater. The respect and loyalty that Senator Udall commands from those who work for him day in and day out is something extraordinary. We don't know when a Udall will next grace the halls with their presence, these halls with their presence. But I do know this: the country needs more leaders like Tom. Senator Udall once said his father and his uncle were lifelong role models because they had the right mix of inspiration and perspiration. He said, quote, "They were both visionaries, but they were also doers." I can think of no better description of Tom Udall himself, a visionary, but also a doer. Tom, as you move on to the next chapter in your life, I wish you and Jill the very best of luck on the road ahead. I yield the floor.
The biggest stories the moment they happen from around the globe. Subscribe to Bloomberg Quicktake now for insight in an instant.